In this episode of Idea City,
So the name of the game is to hype expectations, get them way above reality, and then do what? Cash out.
Moses Znaimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
Right. I thought that would be a perfect introduction to Roger Martin, who is the dean of Canada's arguably most prominent business school, the head of the Rotman School of Business. He was recently featured in an issue of Toronto Life. Is Bay Street doomed? And my thought was, if you are feeling this sense, this clammy sense of something being rotten in the state of Denmark, what are you going to do about it? Who are you going to call? Who are you going to blame? And I think more and more people have a feeling that it's, the bankers and the merchant bankers and the derivative speculators and the hedge fund artists and all these funny people doing funny business down on Bay Street. And even while the world is beginning to fray at the edges, they arrogate these extraordinary rewards to themselves. And the system capitulates to it. After Roger is through speaking, I'm going to show you a report that was published in the Globe and Mail the other day, literally on Tuesday, about some of the salaries enjoyed by the guys who head up the top 5 banks in Canada. The ones that are protected by legislation, these oligopolies. Anyways, Roger, I'm getting into a rant now.
Yeah, that's good.
Here's Roger Martin. Roger, tell us, who are we going to blame?
Oh, there's lots of blame to go around, but I'm glad we started with the MAD theme, because I suspect that lots of you are at a minimum annoyed by the crash of 2008 and 9. I mean, it's at a minimum annoying and actually probably more accurately thought of as tragic, because many people lost their homes, many pension funds got wiped out or put severely underwater. So it was at a minimum very annoying, something to get mad about, but it's also fairly perplexing, I would argue. It's perplexing in a couple of respects. One, it's a bit perplexing that it took us 70 years from the last major stock market meltdown that had the effect of persisting so much to kind of wreck the economy, right? The Great Depression, all the way to 2000, 2001. And it only took us another 7 years to get the next one, and the next one was even worse. And between 2001 and 2008, we put in place what? A whole bunch of fixes that would make sure this would never happen again. So perplexing in that respect. How did that happen? And I would argue it's perplexing in another respect, or at least was for me. Maybe I'm odd, but it was perplexing for me, which is that even though we now have this popular 99% versus 1%, this downturn actually hit a big chunk of what is usually the 1%. So the 1% actually have massively greater stock holdings than the other 99%, and they got hit terribly badly in this downturn. So we had a kind of an interesting situation. Expectations have no bounds, and because expectations have no bounds, you cannot beat expectations forever.
Great ideas are meant to be shared. Join the discussion on Facebook. Moses Znaimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
This is the situation we had, which is we had one in which shareholders did a lot worse than they previously did. And you'll see I've drawn a line here in 1976. I'll come back and explain why 1976 was such an important year. But what's happened to the returns to shareholders, right, broadly speaking, is that their returns have gone down 15% in the period after 1976 versus before 76. And the volatility has gone up 15%. All while that's happening, while shareholders are sort of taking it in the teeth, and the general economy is taking it in the teeth, homeowners, et cetera, there's a group, a very small group, that's doing spectacularly well, spectacularly well, right? And it's CEOs, right? Who in that period before were earning, in real 2010 dollars, inflated up, under $1 million a year, and now they're up to earning $14 million a year on average. And this is across a whole bunch of top 400 companies. This is American data in America. So they've done really well. And there's one other constituency that's done spectacularly well: hedge fund managers. So we've got this odd situation where pretty much everybody else is taking it in the teeth, and two small segments of humanity, very small segments, CEOs and hedge fund managers, are doing spectacularly well. And I would argue that the only way, at least that I can understand this or make sense of it, requires understanding the distinction between two kinds of markets: the real market and the expectations market. And I'm fond of using football, NFL football, to help understand and explain this. So let's use football for the moment. In football, there is a real market. It's a real game. There's another game that plays in parallel with that real game, and it's an expectation game. It's called betting on NFL football. And those friendly people in Las Vegas, called the bookies, or the Mahab, whichever you want, decide on the basis of where the money is coming in. They create something called a point spread, which gives the underdog points, and if you will, charges the favorite points, so that you even the money on either side of the bet. So you've got 50% of money on one side versus the other side. So if the Miami Dolphins are favored by 6.5 points over the Dallas Cowboys, if you bet on the Miami Dolphins, they've got to win by 7 points or more for you to win your bet. And if the Dallas Cowboys win or lose by 6 points or fewer, you win your bet if you bet on them. That structure is very similar to a structure in business, where there's a real market, and associated with that is an expectations market. It's called the stock market, where investors look at what Bombardier is doing and imagine what will happen in the future, and on the basis of that, decide whether the stock price is worth it to pay or not, and the stock price equilibrates to a point where 50% of people think it's worth more and 50% of people think it's worth less. Very similar structures. In football, we can ask the question, what are a couple of things that we can tell about the expectations market in relation to the real market? One is that expectations have no bounds, and because expectations have no bounds, you cannot beat expectations forever. So if we go to one of my favorite teams, the 2007 New England Patriots, who were the first team in the 16-game season to go undefeated during the regular season, 16-0. So in the real game, they were perfect. Absolutely perfect. You couldn't have done better than the New England Patriots did. In the expectations game, they were mediocre. They beat the point spread, i.e. outperformed the Las Vegas point spread in only 10 of 16 games. Why would that happen? Why aren't the expectations market and the real market lined up better? You'd think they would be. No, it's because after going 8-0 on the real market and 8-0 against the spread, in the first 8 games of the season, the spreads did what? Broadened dramatically. You can keep on increasing your performance in the real market forever, but at various times, expectations get way out ahead of reality, like the day before Facebook goes public.
Get the latest Idea City news instantly. Follow us on Twitter. Moses Znaimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
So think about the market of business. You can keep on increasing your performance in the real market forever, but at various times, expectations get way out ahead of reality, like the day before Facebook goes public, right? And it goes public, and what do people think? Suddenly, I'm a little bit worried about the future of Facebook. Boom, it goes down 30%. This is what happens. This is the schism between the real market and the expectations market. Now, why is this so darn important? And how does this relate to 1976, you might be asking? Well, in 1976, something very profound happened in the world of business. In the world of business, we linked the expectations market and the real market together in a way that they hadn't been linked before. Prior to that, almost no stock-based compensation, stock options, deferred share units, restricted share units, stock as compensation barely existed. Less than 1% of CEO compensation in the United States was in stock-based compensation. So it barely existed. In 1976, a very important article was written that said the way to align the interests of management and shareholders is to give stock-based compensation to CEOs. Sounded good, right? Because it said if they do well, if they make the company do well, shareholders will do well and they'll do well. If they do badly, shareholders will do badly and they'll do badly. Perfect alignment. And on the basis of that, we started giving CEOs and other executives lots and lots of stock-based compensation. Did that happen in the NFL? Did we start giving quarterbacks compensation on beating the point spread? Do you think so? No, we didn't. Because what we realized in football was that if we started getting quarterbacks focusing on beating the point spread rather than beating the other team, it would create a miserable game. And we would have all sorts of hanky-panky, like point shaving and tanking and all of this stuff. And so the rule in the NFL is, if you ever bet once on football, you will be booted out for life. Isn't it interesting that in the world of business, we've said the opposite? Not only may you bet on your company, you have to bet on your company. And what's happened over time is that CEOs have figured out, I'm afraid, they've figured out the relation between expectations and reality. So the name of the game is to hype expectations, get them way above reality, and then do what? Cash out. Is it any surprise to any of you what two events coincided in the history of General Electric? It hit $447 billion in market cap the day Jack Welch retired. How did that work? Well, Jack figured it out. Expectations were never, ever going to stay at that level. And of course they didn't. Plummeted all the way in due course down to $70 billion. So shareholders, right, took it in the teeth from 447 to 70. But then what happened to Jeff Immelt at $70 billion market cap? Lots of stock options. Stock is back up to $200 billion in value. Jeff Immelt has done wonderfully. What have the shareholders of GE done in that period? Had their value halved. We were seeing this repeated over and over and over, and what we now have is a volatility machine. We have incentives, powerful incentives for CEOs to spend a little time with their company, jerking up expectations until they're so high that they know they can't get them higher or even keep them at that level, and then exit, let them fall, let somebody else pick them up at a low level, get stock options at a low level, ride them back up, get out, let them fall, etc. And I'm sad to say that it's the situation. Unfortunately, the data is just too overpowering to say anything but that is the situation. It's not, I don't believe, actually, that these CEOs are bad. Boards of directors are giving them exactly that incentive. And last time I checked, if you get an incentive and you don't try and earn out on that incentive, you are insubordinate. Becoming a Canadian bank CEO is the moral equivalent of getting a very, very, very nice lottery ticket.
Get the latest Idealist news, presenter information, and watch streaming video at ideacityonline.com. Moses Znaimer's Idea City Conference. Ideas change the world.
And so companies have foolishly since 1976 drunk the Kool-Aid of stock-based compensation, believing that it actually aligns the interests of management and shareholders. It does the opposite. It disaligns profoundly the interests of shareholders and management. And for that reason, I believe that if we don't make a fundamental change to this doctrine, if we don't make a fundamental change, we will have another crisis, stock market blowout, economic blowout, and I wouldn't bet on it taking even as long as 7 years from 2008. It's happening with greater frequency as everybody's figured out how to play the game as it now exists. So if you don't want to be mad as you are now, another 5 years from now, we need to all change that fundamental doctrine. Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask you some questions.
Okay, sure.
So, Roger,
Yes,
I
sir.
take a little exception to you, well, applying this to all CEOs. I'm a CEO. There are other people in this audience who I'm sure are CEOs. And as I studied this chart, this is a chart that appeared in the Globe and Mail. It seems that these outstanding compensations pile up in only two industries, the financial industry and the resource industry. Even the media game, which was great in the 70s and 80s and began to peter out a little bit in the 90s, doesn't show the same level of rewards or the same number of rewardees as do the financial trades and the resource trades.
Yeah, I would be careful on that one because that's going to be skewed for Canada, right? The Canadian stock market is so much two industries. But I would say that financial services is a special case, and the 2000s were an interesting kind of experiment in creativity. So if you think about the following, that all CEOs figure out in due course that expectations can't rise forever. And the reason they can't rise forever because real markets can only grow so big. There's only so much stuff people need. So when people have a sufficient amount of stuff, the market's going to tail off. The clever people in Wall Street created the first infinitely sized market in the world's history. It was a great innovation. I mean, it's destroyed the economy, but it was just an awesomely clever kind of innovation, which is derivatives, because you can manufacture and sell an unlimited amount of derivatives.
I was struck by this because in addition to their reasonable salaries of about $1 million a month, this article said...
Yeah, you can buy a lot of stuff for $1 million a month. That's good.
This article says that the presidents of the top 5 Canadian banks, who, by the way, are not that amenable to small business, right, and who have some kind of reputation for solidity, right, this sort of puffed-up reputation for solidity. Aren't these the same guys who lost $12 billion in the subprime debacle in the United States?
I believe they are.
Are they the same guys who lost a ton of money in the asset-backed commercial paper?
I believe they are.
Well, according to this,
Other than
they
Ed
are...
Clark, who is clever, but
They are $200 million in the money on their options,
Yes.
these 5 guys.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, and what I would argue is that becoming a Canadian bank CEO is the moral equivalent of getting a very, very, very nice lottery ticket. And if the stock market happens to go up for reasons other than anything that had to do with you during the period of you being CEO, you make a incredible amount of money. If the stock market happens to go down for reasons unrelated to you during that, you have to live with $1 million a month, and that's tough sledding. But most of them seem to get by anyway. So all their lottery tickets are coming up roses, and that's a lot of money.
One last thing, one of the reasons I like Raj so much is he's one of the rare guys in business who thinks that a modicum of idealism is actually appropriate in the conduct of business. At the same time, he's graduating hordes in his school, all of whom want to become the president of one of our banks.
You know, I think some of them do, but if it's fewer than there would have otherwise be, and a whole bunch of others that are actually going to try and make the world a better place through business, you'll have a happy dean on your hands.
All right. Thanks, Raj.
Thank you.
Idea City is a place where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time, our planet needs it most. Idea City is a place. Everybody sing. Where ideas come face to face to inspire and give us hope. At this time.